see us better.
Thank you so much
you.
for sharing your film with us. I feel like I've been, the last couple weeks just thinking about it, and sitting here now, I was preparing, like, what will I say in the beginning? But watching the film right now, I felt like it's such an incredible gift to be able to sit in reflection, but one that activates us. And it's a time in the world that kind of calls for an opportunity to slow down and consider ourselves and the world we live in. Yeah, thank you all for being here. I feel like I want to do a merry shimmy real quick. Something that we're gonna just chat a little bit and really give you an opportunity to share some of your process with us. I think that's such a unique and special thing that we get to have while you're here with us in person. The film obviously has its own existence and is all encompassing, but there's so many curiosities and things to explore, and if you could take us a little deeper, I think that would be a very wonderful thing. I'll just start with a little more reflection, and then I'll open it up a little bit. Without being too, like, in my feels,
A lot of feels.
like the vibrations of this movie have multitudes. There's layers upon layers of things that exist while we watch the film, and there are times where some things fall away, sound falls away, or image falls away, a person's face turns to us, but then many times we're not looking at the people that you're talking to, and this kind of insistence all throughout the film that is your very deep perspective and your filmmaking practice that persists through. I find it, like it kind of conjures that opportunity for me and my body and my mind to feel the many and multiple ways of being, that we're not singular in this way, that everything is, we sort of live in these ways that are complex, and when we talk about it, it's so compartmentalized, but being human and having prescient, kind of being aware of our minds and bodies, we are universes unto ourselves. So I love the universe of this film that you have gifted us with. And maybe we can just start, we've talked about this a little bit, we can kind of start with, how you were drawn to this place and the space where this film
Thank you.
takes hold. Yeah.
I guess while you were talking, I was thinking about the title a bit, and sanctuary station, and that word sanctuary having a lot of other implications right now, and not just sort of this mental internal place, but a really urgent, necessary place that we all need to kind of create for those that are vulnerable. But I think, the term sanctuary station, the title comes from, it was something that Mary would sign off on her poems, Sanctuary Station. And it's the land that she ended up moving to and spending over 50 years at the end of her life as a caretaker. She followed an ad to be a caretaker at an old railroad loggers camp that, became this space, I think, for her to sort of develop this deep relationship to the natural wild world around her, and through that kind of allow her own kind of like internal experience to develop and be mirrored through that and to come through poetry. But she was also a very dedicated educator and became sort of aware of this 400 plus area of old growth, untouched redwoods, like one of the last remaining stands right near where she lived, that then she spent like 35 years involved in fighting to protect and preserve, and eventually it was preserved as in a land trust through organizing like a $7 million purchase of the land, and through direct action, and through litigation and letter writing and all various ways and phases of organizing. So I guess I just wanted to touch on kind of both like the relationship between this sort of protection of this interior wild space and that also happening around these external collective forms of protecting. And yeah, I think in a more, I had been coming out of working in the desert for a while, and the last project I made there was with someone that had a very intimate relationship to the desert, and I was aware of both their kind of leaning into isolation or solitude in order to kind of develop this deeper connection, and how beautiful and kind of instructive that was for them and for me to experience that with them. And also just realizing that in this case it was, that the solitude was not about like self-sufficiency, that there was, an awareness of others. So I got very hot in the desert and toasted, and I think took a trip up to Mendocino and like had this incredible experience, as one can imagine or maybe has, where you go into an old growth redwood grove and you kind of sense the roots and the interconnectedness of the trees and mushrooms and all of the sort of various life forms that it supports. And then I think it also feels like this very absorbing place, and it has more of this mythology of kind of like disappearing into the space. And so that was kind of an original thing I was drawn to. Yeah.
Yeah, you really feel that kind of like entering into the forest feeling, and then the surprising way that the film takes us to then, this kind of entering in alone as a viewer even, and then unfolding into a network of people and community and communing. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the next thing I thought we could talk about is the people in the movie. Mm-hmm. And you have in your other film that you're talking about, Paradise Springs, for anyone who hasn't seen it. I think that was the first one, and there's a subsequent one, where you have a very special way of like making space for another person, and your presence is still felt, and yet the way that you connect and make space for and allow for a person's kind of being to be heard, felt, seen, is really, I think, as a filmmaker who has worked with people, mm-hmm. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to draw out the deep connection. And we've talked a little bit about, the encounters, like when you encounter people and what do you do with the encounter, So I don't know, maybe you can share a little bit of how you encountered people, like when you came to meet them, or how did you know that there was a thread that you were drawn to, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, after the last work also being very intensively with one person, I think I was interested in kind of like less intensive, but still like faster, deep kind of connections, exploring whether that was possible. And the first trip up there, I mean, I went sort of with these various stories in my mind, thinking about like dropouts, like people who had left Los Angeles to, or other places, or left a kind of more public career trajectory or public life or traditional role to sort of be in this particular space. But it's hard to go to a place and look for people who want to be hidden, obviously. So I also, this like importance of connection to the land was on my mind. And so one of the first flyers, I found a flyer at the local health food store that was for this long walk protest, this like 50-mile walking protest that a group of longtime forest defender, Earth First organizers and a few others had, collectively organized and called them up and kind of orchestrated to meet them somewhere on their walk, which was very in the middle of nowhere, like there wasn't really anything around, and I'd parked far away and like walked in the middle of the forest on the other way on the road to meet them, which was kind of just created a lot of like surprise and excitement for them to like find someone else. And then I walked with them for a few days and just got to know them, and that was like hugely instructive for me on the history of the region and the organizing there. And they were excited to, some were more excited than others to sort of talk to me more, or Margie, who has the goats and the marijuana farm that gets cut down. Like, she invited me to her land that she was staying at, and Beth Bosk, who has the interviews in the New Settler, was also like an early conversation that they were, excited to sort of explore these threads and connect me to other people, and that quickly sort of took its own course, yeah. And in that first meeting, Bernadette, who is indigenous Northern Pomo, and was sort of parallel to that movement, but kind of also pursuing her own work, kind of reactivating the space, as she says, which I love, working to kind of like restore cultural practices on this like defunct Air Force base. So, and then I had an old friend from college who also connected me to people, including the young teenager who was just sort of like finding these other elements that could kind of get to the physical, sort of physical sense of the space and how that reflects in the body. Yeah.
Yeah, when we hear your voice, which is a few times, there's something I just am drawn to, that you kind of call towards this physicality. Like, how are you feeling you're feeling this in your body? Mm-hmm. How does it feel in the air? Mm-hmm. And it reminds, it just kind of, for me, what is the word? The complexity of this, like, again, like a mythology around the forest, but then kind of reminding us of the like very hard physical sensations you may feel in the work that goes into being and living there. I think like each of the people who we meet through your film kind of bring out, I mean, they each say something so poignant that also reminds me about watching the film. You know, the new, what's her name, who's reading from The New Settler, and she talks about falling in love with everyone she interviews, and it's kind of like, I get that, you know, like you can have these, and we were talking about these encounters, like just having this like deep connection with someone who you don't really know, and you may just be passing by, but an exchange and an encounter, sharing something, and that there's something very like tangible and real about that, and somehow because, and like the surprising passing of people in a place that is not really, well, the expectation is that it's, maybe there aren't that many people. And so I guess that's another surprising thing, that while this film kind of sets you up to feel or think that maybe it's a film about solitude and isolation, it actually brings out all of this really important thing about being in community. So that's something really cool. Yeah. I had another quick question, and then if you wanted to, we could see if people have things to share also. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you structured the film, or what kind of brings it, how you brought it together. It's non-linear in that sense, poetic and lyrical.
So there was the story of this musician, Kendra Smith, who was sort of one of the dropout figures I was thinking about, who was part of Dream Syndicate and Opal, which later became Mazzy Star after she left. Maybe that rings some familiarity. But she moved up to Northern California, kind of deciding not to really perform or tour anymore, or play with those bands. And anyway, she made a few albums there, The Guild of Temporal Adventurers, and another called 5 Ways of Disappearing. And they have these interludes, they have sort of reinterpretations of other folkloric or poetic texts, and then other just songs that seem kind of very of the region. And I was listening to them a lot when I was first traveling up there, and I think that sort of framed a lot of thinking about it as like an album, and with these different passages. And then I think once I met Mary, which was sort of later on in the process, and encountered her work, and just was really struck by it. I don't think I ever would have set out to think I'm going to make a landscape film with poetry read over it necessarily, you know, but her reading of the work is so alive, and working with those poems, I think, changed the way I thought about the interviews, maybe, too, and the structure, and then also ways of working with sound. And I started, towards the end, kind of incorporating my own. I had been editing with this Kendra Smith music, and then gradually sort of replacing it with both some of my own stuff, and then Matea Baim, who did the sound mix and composed some of the interludes, kind of helped bridge some of those pieces. Yeah. I love when you shared that, and I had a preview to this, but the album, I think it's so informative to think about in terms of structure and how to pull something together in this way that gives, again, this like multiplicity of experience. I think it draws together, but it's not necessarily that these different parts are giving more information in the sense of like clarity, but
really giving us expansion, and I love that so much. It really the structure expands, and that's where I feel like your point of view, the way that you make films is so present, and not despite, but that you could be swept away into other people's, into all of these really fascinating people's lives and just follow that thread, but that they become part of this world in which we get to live in for a little while.
Thanks.
See if we can open it up. If anyone has reflections or something to share or questions. We can do this.
Yes, Real.
I guess I just want to talk about how the film made me feel. While I was watching it, I kind of just got the sense of wanting to have a conversation with my mom. Watching the film, it made me, I don't know why, made me miss her and want to go run and start a conversation with her. I guess if I could describe the film in one word, it's, I guess, mother or Mother Nature, I guess. I don't know, I felt very emotional, but also at times anxiety. It felt very therapeutic at times where I could just watch and see like these beautiful nature shots and just listen to like the wind, the trees, the bugs. And then at times, especially, I forgot the scene where she's like spinning and then you just hear like almost like a drum or wind like breeze by. Like that one particular scene gave me like goosebumps. And I guess also why I'm stuck on like Mother Nature in general too is because I guess hearing all the women talk and also seeing all the nature, like I feel like there's not one shot where Mother Nature is not on screen. Whether that's the woman you're showing or just nature in general, human nature or nature. But yeah, I guess that's how it made me feel personally. And what I think about is, yeah, I loved it.
Thank you for sharing that.
We can,
I have a question.
yes.
Maybe you could speak to the
I'll let you use the mic.
black and white
Yeah.
nature of the film.
Sure.
I mean, it's so striking, the film. Obviously, the landscape shots, really beautiful, but I thought even more is all of these shapes and objects, and they weren't even like the splinters from the tree. It's hard to even tell what they are at first. And so how did you decide to start with black and white, or how did you end up with black and white film?
Can everyone hear that question? I could just repeat a little bit. So the question is like the choice to use black and white film, and noticing that sometimes you're unable to kind of parse through what you're seeing, and that maybe the black and white had using black and white film had some kind of contribution to that. Yeah, so if you could tell us more about that.
I mean, I think it's it creates a study of light in the most basic way, and that seeing that forest space as, as this sort of protective, sheltering place. I think the black and white film sort of exaggerated that. It also exaggerates what you can't see, what's impenetrable or what's hidden. And hopefully that sort of allows space for you to kind of inject your own meaning. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Maybe one more? Will you use the mic?
Thank you for making this. So my question, like for context, I do land defense work here in LA. And I feel like when you do that work, the question that comes to mind is like the land always has a story to tell, and you have to figure out how to let the land do that itself. I haven't seen your other film, but I'm excited to watch it now, and I'm curious if there was, because the desert and a redwood forest are so different, like trees are so enigmatic to us for whatever reason. And I'm curious if you found, if you had to change how you were telling that story up there versus in the desert, or just kind of how that process went because of, our associations and the value that we ascribe to different landscapes. And I don't know, I just want to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like developing like a personal space within the space of the film to experience the landscape, as opposed to maybe like seeing like a more verdant green forest that, I don't know, like creating something that's almost unfamiliar in order to build a connection. So, and then, yeah, I think the layers, like how to get to the layers of what's underneath and what's above, and movement of, root systems and water, and these like long dividing ridges that go to the sea. I think I had to go back and sort of experiment with movement a lot in order to build that. I don't know if that really gets to what you're, just very different than the desert, which I feel like is a lot about like experiencing time through kind of slow changes in light, which you don't really have in the same way there. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. Oh, hi.
I wonder if you could speak about your editing process. Like the montage, collage, stuff and stuff was so intuitive and incredible. And I wondered like how you kept track of all the different pieces and whether you worked linearly or like, just a little bit more about the practical bit of how you made the, how you intuited your way through it.
Yeah, so I made it intermittently over 8 years, starting in 2016, fall before the elections. And I think, but I would only go back like once a year. I was only able to go up every so often. And so I would have like a few interviews and some footage to start with, and I'd build an interview segment and a landscape segment and put them next to each other and just like feel the flatness of what was missing, I guess. And so there, the editing is also instructing what I'm sort of going back and finding or seeking. And so it's just working with a lot of different sections, like individual sections of each person trying to kind of find the rhythm of their piece, working with their audio interview and then weaving that into the footage. And then I think because that can feel really like kind of stuck, and you're cutting up a lot of interview material, and really like it's more severe and it feels harsh, and kind of like trying to like breathe some of the life back into what maybe was extracted from the interviews into other places in the film or the landscape or, yeah, the sound track. I don't know.
Yeah,
This is-
it had a quality of like all overness, which I found, I guess what you're talking about, the layers, but just so beautiful.
Thank
Just
you.
So beautiful.
Thank you. It's kind of messy organization process, probably. Okay. Should we
Yeah, let's-
go?
We
have
got
a-
some treats that are out there, and then Kate, I just wanted to shout out Caitlin, who made handmade homemade vegan cupcakes,
Oh,
and we
wow.
have some
Thank
Filipino
you.
treats from a local shop nearby, Dollar Hits. But we can keep talking and
Please stick around
communing,
and-
stay, drink.
Yeah.
Thank you all
Thank
for being
you.
here, and thank you, Brigid.